Hello, and welcome to Uniquely Sociology, a podcast production of the Department of Sociology at the University of Central Florida. I'm your host, Dr. Ramon Hinojosa. Uniquely Sociology is a podcast that explores the research and creative efforts of those doing the good work of sociology. You want to know what sociology is and the contributions that sociology makes to society? You've come to the right podcast. It's Uniquely Sociology. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Timothy Hawthorne, a tenured associate professor of Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, housed in the Department of Sociology here at the University of Central Florida. Dr. Hawthorne's work is in the area of GIS. He does also work with social and environmental inequalities and citizen science. And fortunately for us, he is also the 2022 National Geographic Explorer Awardee, in part for the work that he's done on the nation's first ever GeoBus. So hello, Dr. Hawthorne, and welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, Ray. I'm really excited to chat with the podcast audience today. Thanks for hosting me.
Great. So let's begin by having you tell the audience about yourself. You know, who you are, where did you go to school, where did you do your PhD, and what did you do it on?
Yeah, so thanks for that. So firstly, I am a public scholar, and so I work at the interface of geography, sociology, and GIS more broadly. I do a lot of work, particularly around social inequalities, and specifically around the idea of utilizing mapping technologies, drone technologies, to increase access to knowledge, data, and the technology resources that allow communities to tell their stories, right? And to really amplify local and community-based knowledge forms through research. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well, but that's kind of the overarching theme of my view on public scholarship. In terms of my own background, I received a PhD in geography in 2010 from Ohio State University, a master's degree at West Virginia University, also in geography in 2005, and an undergraduate degree in geography with a minor in English at Ohio Wesleyan University in 2003.
Okay, so solid Midwesterner, come down to Florida, huh?
Yep, yeah, definitely excited to be down here. I've been here since 2015 and just have really enjoyed the Southeast region, and just love raising a family and working here as well.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about your overall research that you're doing now. Now, you mentioned drones, and drones are really quite a new and innovative technology. So how does one use a drone for doing research?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, I mean, you mentioned drones to start off with, and I think drones are those kind of things that everyone has a reaction to the word drone, right? Most of it is probably negative, right? The military uses, surveillance uses, privacy concerns, and things like that. And those are very real concerns. But one of the things that we do in the research team that I'm a part of, called Citizen Science GIS here at UCF, is focused on using drones to tell the stories of communities and using the imagery from those drones to better understand the environments as well. So one example of that work is in the work we do in Belize down in Central America. We've worked with drones since 2016 in Belize. We work with fishermen, tour guides, nonprofits, NGOs, government agencies, and community members to map changing landscapes, particularly the changing coastal community of Hopkins Village, Belize, that has been experiencing increases in flooding, increases in climate change effects and impacts as well. And so we've used the drones to document flooding changes in the community. So for example, after a big flooding event, us and our community partners might go out and fly the drone to show where the flooding hotspots are, for example. Another way we utilize the drones is to actually do a count of the infrastructure in the community. So things like just understanding how many buildings are in the community by flying the drone over. And then from there, doing field surveys where we walk through the community with community scientists, community members in our team to actually take attribute data of those buildings and that infrastructure as well. So things like we measure the distance from the seashore, we measure the height above sea level, the types of construction materials, the roofing materials, and things like that, all designed to help with resiliency and coastal community flood protection as well. And I think the most important thing as a public scholar is, again, the drone technologies are not just used by us as researchers, but we have trained community members to use the drones, to fly the drones, and most importantly, to tell us stories and do interviews, kind of like we're doing right now in this podcast, where we're flying the drone, it's connected to an iPad so you can see in the live feed. And let's say you're a community member in Hopkins Village, we could have you sitting there telling us what you're seeing in that imagery. You could tell us about that flooding event, the loss of property, the damages that you saw in your community. And we're documenting all of that through interview data along with that drone imagery as well. So it's a really powerful way to kind of think about it in what we often refer to as spatial storytelling, using drones and GIS and mapping with those interviews and that qualitative data as well.
Oh, that's incredible. And so the data that you produce, then does that go to, I'm assuming, the community leaders, the policy experts, governmental leaders within the country, and then they do what with it?
Yeah, so it's shared in a lot of different forms, including just the raw data itself on hard drives and laptops, also on different open data platforms that we use online. We share in printed out maps within the community in different village settings as well, including places like the local library, the village council office, things like that. We also had a really powerful set of conversations a couple of the summers of our field work, and we will have another one this summer where we were invited to the US Embassy in Belize, and our undergraduate students presented to embassy leadership and about 15, 20 invited NGOs to talk about the importance of the work with community members using drones and GIS. And so there's just a variety of platforms in which we share. But really, at the end of the day, I think what most importantly happens is just the bringing people together to share the stories of the data and to share the stories of community members talking about that data as well. It's amazing when you get a local Red Cross representative in there with a government leader and an NGO leader. They're all talking about the same thing, but they're not necessarily in the same room talking. And that's what I think, the real power of public scholarship is bringing those groups together and being a part of that conversation, not leading it, but being a part of it as well.
No, that's incredible. And I'm assuming this ties as well to some of the work that you've done with the Geo Bus. And one of the reasons that you are one of the 2022 National Geographic Explorers. So maybe could you tell us a little bit about, how you came up with the idea and what it is and what you're going to do with it?
Yeah, so funny story. Everybody always wonders why I do so much of this education in K through 12 work, and I think the answer is really simple. Is because every time we do public scholarship with communities, we start with a simple question, and that is, what can a partnership with us do for you? And inevitably, one of the answers in every conversation we have is you could help support the kids in our community or our neighborhood to understand these technologies and use them and get them excited about science, right? So that led us to GeoBus, right? GeoBus is a 40-foot city bus that was donated to us by a local bus company here in Orlando called Lynx. And the idea behind the nation's first GeoBus is a lot of schools, particularly Title I and high need school districts, are interested in these technologies, mapping and drones and related geospatial technologies, but they don't necessarily have the expertise or the technologies themselves in their school districts to teach these tools for science and research. And so the GeoBus brings that mobile lab to a classroom, to a school district. And it also importantly brings our UCF student team and myself as folks that can get those K through 12 teachers and students excited about the science we do, the social science work we do, and UCF is a destination of choice. So it's a 40-foot city lab, completely converted the inside of the bus. It has a giant geovisualization wall. It has a mini drone flight zone outside, a thing called an augmented reality sandbox, virtual reality goggles, just all kinds of really interesting technologies that we use in our science. And we bring that kind of fieldwork learning and that lesson planning to the schools that we work with as well. So it's just a really cool project.
So the GeoBus is a mobile lab, a mobile classroom, and it comes with leading experts in the area to teach people how to use the technology and how to interpret the data. Is that?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the coolest things, tomorrow I have an event out in Titusville, Florida, about 35 minutes from campus. We just took a group of high school teachers and 4 high school students out to the west coast of the US, to California, to do drone mapping with us on another project on coastal ecosystems in Northern California. And that came from an initial GeoBus visit, right? A conversation with the kids about their excitement. And we said, all right, let's do something even cooler. We had funding from the National Science Foundation. So we brought them out into the field as 15, 16, and 17-year-olds to have their first fieldwork experience through our NSF grant. So it's one of those game changers, right? I didn't myself get into GIS and mapping until I was a junior in college. had no idea this stuff existed. And that's really what this is about for us, is getting that access and interest early on. So, we get those folks coming in as freshmen knowing that this is a potential major or certificate opportunity at UCF as well.
So if the folks out there listening to this say to themselves, hey, I really like what Dr. Hawthorne is doing, I've got to go to UCF and I've got to study with this cat, what can they expect from you?
Yeah, I think the first thing is they can expect a very open-ended experience, and one that is guided by their passions and their interest. I pride myself really strongly on, as being a mentor and a professor, is letting students understand what their interests are and allowing me with all these cool technologies to help them see how that technology can support their interest, right? That could be everything. I'm thinking back to one of my GIS classes. We had a student that was really struggling to grasp the technology and really wasn't into the class. And we had a project, and I said, well, what do you care about? And she just kind of looked at me very blankly. She's like, I don't really care about GIS. I'm just here. And I said, all right, well, what do you really care about? She goes, I really like skateboarding on campus. I said, all right, well, what do you do when you skateboard? She's like, well, I have a problem. I get into sidewalk issues, cracks on the sidewalk, poorly paved areas, and it's really hard to skateboard. I said, well, why don't you map that with GIS? And so she created this community-based platform where she used Reddit and different discussion boards to basically identify skateboarding pitfalls on campus and hotspots, and created a mapping project in the class. And that is, I think, what you can expect from me, is I'm taking what I do with the technology and applying that to whatever it is you might be interested in as a student. The second part is, I would say, if you ever wanted to come work with me as a student, you would have a lot of community interaction. I'm really big on saying that the classroom can only take you so far. You have to take that classroom out into the field, work with community partners, because we're very smart people, right? We have PhDs. We're great at the academic things we do, but sometimes that academic work is not as inclusive as it could be of community members that have just as much knowledge, just different types of knowledge about social and environmental issues. So a lot of community field work, a lot of listening to community partners and working with them rather than for them as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so getting the students out of the classroom, getting them to actually do practical projects in the communities where they may live or will spend their lives. And so it actually leads me to the next question, which is the students that you've worked with do very well. They get their masters and their PhDs, and they go on to do great things. And so maybe you could tell us what sorts of things that they actually go on to do.
Yeah, so one of the great things about GIS, particularly GIS with sociology students, is it's just such a opportunity to explore so many different types of careers. So we've had some students go on, to complete our grad programs or go on to other graduate programs and become faculty members. We've also had students that work with nonprofits. We have had students work with government agencies, also, software and technology firms as well. We have one student, Dr. Lane Graham of UCF Sociology, graduated in 2020. She's now working with Esri, which is the largest GIS company in the world, doing work with the Smithsonian, with First Nation tribes here in the US, NOAA, just all kinds of really amazing partners. And I think the common thing that I would say about folks like Lane is the combination of the GIS and the sociology background really makes our students stand out, right? It's that ability to connect on the human people level, understand the inequalities that exist from technologies like GIS, and then also be tech savvy enough to be able to use these technologies as well. That makes our students very different and very much more marketable and likely to land a job as well. So I'm just so impressed with the students I've worked with and what they've been doing after their degrees here at UCF.
Now, if the folks out in the audience wanted to get a sense of the research that you do, whether that's published research or perhaps some of the more creative and engaged projects like the Geo Bus, what project or two projects would you direct them to? And maybe I could just have you talk about that for a second, but of course we'll put that in the link for those who want to take a look at that a little bit later on.
Yeah, well, firstly, we're very active on social media. Our handles on all the platforms are Citizen Science GIS, and our website is citizensciencegis.org. But the two projects I'm most proud of, we already talked about GeoBus, right? The focus on youth education and the next generation of science. That to me is my most prideful thing as both a public scholar and a parent as well. We've touched on that already. The second one that I'm most proud of, and the one that probably energizes me the most beyond building a bus and painting a bus and doing all those things, is our NSF funded work in Belize that we sort of talked about, but it's part of a broader program called what's called an REU and an RET, a research experiences for undergraduates and research experiences for teacher program. That's a 7-week program every summer, including, again, this summer. We had a bit of a pause with COVID. Last year, we were all virtual. The year before, we had to cancel due to COVID. This summer, it's all in person again. So we'll have 7 weeks, about a week or so here in the US at UCF. We'll get trained up on how to do basic community-based research methods. We'll come together as a team. And then we go to Belize for about a month, living in the village of Hopkins, where I mentioned earlier, working on flooding and vulnerability, and also beach debris and marine litter. Pounding the pavement, working with the community to capture their stories, represent those in maps and with drones as well, to really understand how something like flooding is unevenly experienced in this community, right? A community that's got a very strong traditional cultural richness from its griffin of people. But then on the either end, on the north and south side, you have exacerbating tourism development, condos, new expensive resorts and things like that. And so you see uneven development playing out across the community, economic inequality, educational inequality. And then you see those effects through flooding and also debris and litter that shows up in the village as well. And so our students work with the communities to map and understand that while interviewing community members as well. They get to understand the local culture and live in that community. So it's just one of those life-changing transformational experiences for not only our students, but for me as a professor. And then we come back to UCF for the last week and a half to kind of crunch all the numbers and the data and the qualitative data, and then write up our reports and present that work. So it's just a really cool project because we were able to bring in students and teachers from all over the US and also the University of Belize to work together in team-based science across disciplines. We have sociologists, geographers, environmental study, economics, poli-sci, you name it, we've probably had that major on our team. And I've been doing that since 2016 and just really love that project, mainly because that community focus and also because it allows us to work so closely in a mentoring role with our students and help them, get towards their next step post-graduation as well.
Oh, that's quite incredible. So you have a project that is part study abroad, it's part community-based participatory research, it is part qualitative lab, it is part data analysis lab, and it is part all parts interdisciplinary research that has a profound impact on people's lives and well-beings in the communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most important thing for any US students that are listening is it's completely funded. So we are removing the financial barriers to doing international research for our students, right? So they get paid to be a part of the team. All of their travel is covered, their housing and things like that. We're very grateful to the U.S. National Science Foundation for that support. I mean, you couldn't do that without that kind of support. That's not something a university can support on its own. So it's really great. It's got a focus on underrepresented students as well. So about 70% of our students are from groups that are traditionally underrepresented in the STEM fields as well. So it's a great program to be a part of. I've learned so much and just really enjoy that mentoring aspect, right? There's a difference between teaching on campus and doing research in the field, with students. It's such a captivating experience and love that part of the work.
Well, Dr. Hawthorne, you've sold me. Do you have any slots in your program this summer?
Hey, you're always welcome, Ray. We'd love to have you come down. I think you've got such a great background in qualitative work. It'd be a great asset to the program as well. So you're always welcome.
We are very fortunate to have you here in our program in the Department of Sociology, and I think our students are very fortunate to have you as well. And one of the things that I did fail to mention in the lead up to the podcast is that Dr. Hawthorne is also the graduate advisor for the graduate study program in the Department of Sociology. And so for any of our listeners out there, if you had questions about what graduate school is like and what sort of things you could study here in sociology, Dr. Hawthorne is the person that you're going to speak with.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, for those that are listening and you're thinking about sociology as a degree field, I would say now is the time to do it. I mean, if you watch the news, you can see how important what we do is and how much more we need to do as sociologists and social scientists more broadly. So, UCF Sociology is going through some changes. We're opening up a new BA to PhD program in 2023, 2024. There's a lot of new energy and excitement across so many different faculty and grad students. We're looking forward to the next generation of UCF Sociology and hope you might consider us.
Oh, excellent. Well, Dr. Hawthorne, I'd really like to thank you for taking the time to speak with me today and, give our audience out there some idea of the work that you do and what UCF Sociology can do for them.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And thank you for sharing this important podcast. I think the more we can do as public scholars to share our work in different formats like this podcast, the better off the future of science and social science is. So I'm excited for the next generation that's watching this. And I hope whatever your audience is doing is having some sort of meaningful impact and change in society. So thanks for having me.
Excellent. And so I'd also like to thank you, our audience, for taking your time today. I know you're all busy. Got lots of things going on, but the fact that you take the time to listen to this shows that you as well are interested in all things that are uniquely sociology. This is Dr. Ramon Hinojosa saying thank you, and we hope that you'll join us next week.